Okay, what we're going to be talking about today is proving angles congruent. And there's certain theorems or facts that we have to go over. For example, if we look at theorem 2.1, vertical angles, we know that all vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical, and angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical, so they're congruent. The next theorem that you need to know is if two angles are supplements, in other words, they're supplementary angles, then the other two angles are also congruent. So angle 1 and angle 3 are supplements. And angle 2 and angle 3 are supplements. So therefore, these two angles are congruent. That's what they're saying. In other words, angle 1 and angle 3 are supplementary. Angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary. So therefore, consequently, these two are congruent. And just like we did supplementary, complementary, if we have two angles that are complementary, and we know that angle 3 and angle 2 are complementary, then there's a conclusion that angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent. These two are congruent because both angles are complementary to angle 2. The next thing that we want to talk about are all right angles are congruent. So if there's a 90-degree angle here and there's a 90-degree angle, then these two angles are congruent. If two angles are congruent and supplementary, then the only conclusion we can make it's a right angle, because if they're congruent, then each angle has to be 90 degrees since they're congruent. So they're going to be right angles. The next part of the lesson has to do with doing a two-column proof. And here I'm going to go through the process. We're going to prove that angle 1 and angle 3, these two angles, we're going to prove that they're congruent. We know that angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles. And I want you to make a note. You always start with a given. There's always a given. Now, we know that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary because they're a linear pair. That's what it says here. We know that angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary because they're a linear pair. I also know that angle 1 plus angle 2 equals 180, the angle measurements. And I know that angle 2 and angle 3 have a sum measurement of 180. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write that measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3. And they say transitive property. Measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to 180. 180 is equal to the measure of angle 2 and measure of angle 3. So this is transitive. You see this part? They subtracted. So we know that those two are equal. And if they're equal, then they're congruent. So I went through the process of proving that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. We're going to apply the vertical angle theorem. We know that these two angles are vertical angles and they're also congruent. So we're going to say 2x plus 21 equals 4x. We're going to subtract 2x from both sides, and then we divide by 2. So 21 divided by 2 is 10.5. That would be the value of x. Once again, we're given a two-column proof. You always start with the given. Here's the figure. They're saying that angle 1 and angle 4 are congruent, and they want you to prove that angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent. Statement 1, that's given. Statement 2, angle 4 is congruent to angle 2 because these are vertical angles and they're congruent. So if angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, that's called the transitive property because angle 1 is congruent to angle 4 and angle 4 is congruent to angle 2. So consequently, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. That's the transitive property. And we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And we know that angle 2, we're trying to prove that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. So we know that angle 1 and angle 4 are congruent. We know that 4 is congruent to 2 because they're vertical angles. And we know that 1 and 2 is congruent. So therefore, we know that 1 and 3 are congruent because they're vertical angles. So by transitive property, angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. Sometimes we have to write out a proof. We have to write it as a paragraph in words. It says, given angle 1 and angle 3 are supplementary, angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary, and we're trying to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary because it's given. The measurement of angle 1 plus the measurement of angle 3 is 180 by definition of supplementary angles. Angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary because it's given. So the measurement of angle 2 plus the measurement of angle 3 is equal to 180 by the same definition. And of course, if these two are both equal to 180, then because of transitive property, we know that the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 3 equals the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3. We subtract 3 from both sides. We know that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 2, and therefore we know that the angles are congruent.